Right, call this house to order. Order. Right, good afternoon everybody. Welcome to the semi-finals of the APU National Novice 2017. So I'm your chair, Jordan, and with me today Isaac, Azim, Alex, and Darshan. Right, so our motion, this house supports a world where misandristic practices and policies are used to overthrow the patriarchy, like call upon the Prime Minister.
There comes a time in someone's life where he is to take a position that is neither politic nor popular, but rather because his conscience demands that he does so. And insofar as the continued subjugation of women to submissive positions by generations of men who have profited from the continued generational advantages that they have accrued, my conscience has never spoken louder. I'll do two things in my speech, but first, an important piece of clarification. Two things. One, how the patriarchy is implemented and enforced under the status quo, and two, how we'll employ misandristic practices. So one, how is the patriarchy implemented under the status quo? We think two things. One, understand that it's a current dominant narrative as to how women should remain subjugated and submissive as to what the dominant majority of people believe, right? But secondly, understand that there are also vast, overwhelming societal notions to condemn women into those positions of submission. They do this via tethering this to religious notions such as Christianity, which means that women can't ever be baptized, for instance, but also cultural notions such as India, where we see that women have been submissive to men in this particular circumstances. If we empower women to grasp the idea that they are empowered as opposed to remaining submissive, that is how we overthrow the patriarchy. Two, how we'll employ misandristic practices under our side. We think like a vast majority of things can accrue. We think like one, women can publicly insult men, but two, we think that it's also fine to discriminate men on the masculine sorts of ideals. Understand, women have felt the same brunt of that burden. Women have felt the same consequences that we are currently employing. This is the only way to earn back and take back what women deserve. Two things in my speech then. One, the principle of reparation and why it's so important. Two, consequences. So one, reparation. Clarification here. Understand that the objective is equality, but treating men and women equally under the status quo does not lead to the sort of equality we want. Because what you do is you ignore the sort of generational disadvantages that women have had to face primarily due to the submission of women due to misogynistic policies. These are things such as like lower wage gap, for instance, or the idea that women should be submissive. Yes, to form progress, these things from a residue have meant that women are placed in a submissive manner. What do I mean by generational disadvantages? So these are things such as misogynistic policies and practices, right? We think like three things fundamentally. One, the systemic issue of paying women 70 cents to the dollar, insofar as that exists today, we think that's a problem. But two, the subjugation of women to work and the boxing of women into places where they work in daily household chores as opposed to being able to work in like high-paying positions. But three, also the patriarchal cultural practices that condemn women to submission that I mentioned earlier. Why is this incredibly harmful? Understand, no thank you. This weakens the ability for women to climb the social ladder. This means that the prestige that they could get from garnering high-paying jobs, the money that they could obtain from getting those same high-paying jobs are necessarily sacrificed from this side of the house. This money and prestige was stolen from these women, and we think it's fine to take it back. The benefits that were accrued to men instead. Insofar as there are less women in those particular positions, more men went into those positions. They were able to garner the prestige, they were able to garner the funds, which meant that women were generationally disadvantaged. Women were never able to garner and grasp the same amount of privileges. Why is this important? No, thank you. Two reasons. One, we fixed this, right? By ensuring that women are no longer placed in a submissive position, but rather one that is empowering. What we do is we ensure that women are far more dominant in the workplace. This means role models. Insofar as mansplaining is a thing in communities and business practices, we think that is incredibly important. But secondly, we think far more importantly, the funds that they deserve, we give back to them. This is how we dismantle the patriarchy. But even if we lose on outcomes, understand that state opposition has to deal with the fact that this is the principal stance that we are taking. We are taking back what we are owed, and we think we deserve it. Consequences. How do we overthrow the patriarchy in this particular instance. Understand that the patriarchy exists because men are able to enjoy the sorts of benefits that they do due to the systematic policies that exist previously. Understand that what we do on our side is we give an incredibly impactful, empowering factor. Understand that these things trickle down. The women who are likely to employ misandristic practices outside the house are women who are already powerful, already incredibly prestigious. These are women such as Sheryl Sandberg. These are women such as Marissa Mayer, the CEO of Yahoo, for instance. These are women who can benefit the vast majority of women by two ways. One, these women can act as role models for women in these particular circumstances. Individuals are likely to empower women at a point in which they themselves are empowered. Implicitly, this trickles down to the working class who also benefit from women who necessarily grasp that particular narrative. But two, understand that these women also end up placing importance of the reason to standing up to yourself. They place importance and place a pedestal onto the fact that you have to fight for what is yours. The idea that women have a right to be just as vitriolic as men is one that is incredibly powerful, and it's a strong message that we purport. Why is this important? Two reasons. One, we overthrow the patriarchy. We change societal ideas about women being the powerful dominant force to be reckoned with. We make women the empowering one. We change the we change the sorts of small dynamic interactions that exist under the status quo, where women are placed on the higher pedestal. Women are the ones who are necessarily insulting men, as opposed to men always being the ones who place women on a lower pedestal. We empower women, but no thank you. Secondly, understand that also this is important in the context of developing countries, which already are massively patriarchal. Clarification, women have fundamentally very little basic rights in these particular places. India, Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, women can't even drive, for instance, right? These are women who don't have these sorts of privileges that women under the status quo have. Why is this important? It's important because for these women, understand that there is no alternatives. They can't lobby for legislation which benefits them. They can't get allies in those particular places. The only way for them to get progressive change is to fight back. We are fine with these women being instrumentalized insofar as it benefits them and gets what they want. That is incredibly important. But before 6, I'll take Rifki.
How do people find empowering when the woman in media is the woman that vilifies and demonizes certain communities?
I think that the idea that a woman is able to stand up to the vitriolic men who have subjugated them is incredibly empowering for women who face the same amount of discrimination on the ground. I don't think that's necessarily true. Ally analysis. Or it's going to tell you that you lose allies by alienating the vast majority of allies that could accrue. Reasons why we don't think this is the case. Understand, we get women who are absolutely disempowered but only able to be empowered under our policy. Why is this important? Two reasons. One, these women need this sort of support and face the sort of time-sensitive issues that occur under the status quo. These are women in Saudi Arabia who can't drive, for instance. These are women who literally can't have the time to get the organic change that they want. These are women who have to fight back. But two, understand that these women, also the allies who are likely to contribute most to the society, to the social movement. These are the women who are likely to show up for protests, insofar as these are the women who are most affected by this patriarchy that exists. But also these are women who end up being the ones who pressure their constituencies very passionately to enact affirmative action legislation, for instance. And that's how you get actual change. When you empower these particular women who lose out most under their side of the house. All has to deal with the fact that these women necessarily disappear and are disempowered under their side of the house. We are the only side of the house which materializes a world where women take back what they deserve. So proud to propose.
We from side opening opposition believe in the quality of life for women is the utmost important fight, and we don't believe that hating men is the way to achieve this. I'm going to do two things in my speech. First, I'm going to first I'm going to talk about my rebuttals, then I'm going to move on to my argument. Firstly, rebuttals. So a side opening government came here to say that implementing state policies and misandric policies would only benefit women because now women would have the upper hand towards men. However, we totally disagree, because now when you do implement the state policies and the misandric policies, now you're only going to promote hatred towards men. You're only going to promote anti-man policies and hatred towards men. So now if a woman who is probably having issues or problems in the workplace, if you try to reconcile with men isn't going to pay any attention, because currently in status quo, currently in status quo, men is currently have the upper hand at the workplace. So people are more likely to believe them. People are more likely to trust them more. So if you go and confide in a male, no, thank you. If you go and confide with in your workplace with men, they're not going to pay attention to you, because they're going to come out and say, "Oh no, I'm not going to care about you. I'm not going to fight for you, because now all I know is that you are anti-men and you hate us." So you're not going to promote any form of equality. You're not going to promote any form of good. Only you're going to promote hatred. So what is patriarchy? So patriarchy is a phenomenon. Women aren't as equal when it comes to patriarchy. Sit down. So women aren't as equal because they have less opportunities, such as less job opportunities, less education opportunities. They have worse off treatment due to this patriarchy, as people favor men over women, and because men has it easier in this world. However, side opposition is willing to defend the feminist movement to penetrate public spaces, to educate through probably social media. We are willing to defend a world where incentivizing feminist values in school curriculums, to teach on equality, to teach love, and not to teach hate. We are willing to defend a world where affirmative action, there will be an increase of affirmative action policies to provide the same equality towards women and men, and not to share and not to promote hatred towards men. Government would then defend a world where there's only anti-men, and where there wouldn't be any form of friendship, or there wouldn't be any form of connection between men and women, because all women are going to do is say, "Oh, we hate men, we should never have them, and they should be completely eliminated." So affirmative action policies, at least on our side, would still allow men to have some form of opportunities and not completely eliminate them as a whole. Take a seat. So moving on to my argument, why having these policies would not overthrow the patriarchy. For example, there was this incident where there was this screening of Wonder Woman in California, which was the only women screening in California, and men took this offensively. They started to protest. They started to say, "Oh, why is women given this opportunity, even for a small thing like watching a Wonder Woman movie?" So men started protesting outside cinemas. Why? They are now saying no to men and only allowing women to watch this movie. And it's just a small minor thing, but it created such a big issue. So in government's world, feminists are more likely to use instances like this to only say that, "Oh no, we should not accept women because all they're ever going to do is only going to be against men." And the feminist movement is going to now embrace misandric policies, and the feminist movement will now only hire women and only empower these women to overthrow men. This will only then push men further to get further angry and further hate on women, and this is not going to overthrow your policy. I mean, this is not going to overthrow your patriarchy in your world, because if something as small as watching a Wonder Woman movie is going to put men off the edge, something as big as implementing these misandric policies is going to push them even further. What are the outcomes in our world? In the outcomes in our world, you will not be solving you will not solve the problem of angering men. You're only going to push them even further. Have a seat. You're only going to hold, because men currently hold the most amount of political power. They hold the most Senate majority. They're the more favorite one, because people tend to listen men more, and you're not going to solve this angering men. You're only going to push them even further. So now they're not going to push to help you all. They're not going to push to help women, because all they're ever going to do is only going to push backward and say, women should not have these opportunities, because all they ever do is hate us. And hate is not the way to solve anything. So with this, you wouldn't be able to garner critical mass, and you wouldn't be able to push women forward. Moving on. Okay, before I interrupt.
What impetus is there to enact change when men are comfortable with patriarchy? There's really no incentive to change when men get away with doing the things they want. It means that you don't get the affirmative action policies that you propose.
At least in our world, men and women have some form of opportunities. At least in our world, men have some form of opportunities. In your world, you're completely eliminating men. You're only going to make them hate us even more. I'm now going to talk about how quality of life is going to change, how quality of life is going to be far more worse on government side compared to opposition. Currently, we live in a world where women, currently we live in a world where the quality of life for women is pretty shit. So, you know, we can't even walk down the street without being catcalled. We can't walk down, we don't even get equal opportunity for women. We're constantly being told we are stupid, we are not good enough, man is better than us. So yes, quality of life is kind of shit for women. However, if the moment you implement these policies, it's going to make it even harder for women. You're going to make women's life a living hell. Let me tell you why. So in government's world, with the implementation of misandric policies, you're only going to be promoting you're going to be promoting hate. You're going to be promoting anti-men. So men are going to hate you even more. Now your catcalling is going to get worse. People, like last time, at least if you walk down the street, they'll just whistle at you, they'll call you names. Now they probably spit at you. Now they probably even throw stones at you. They're going to stop protesting and they're going to live your life. They're going to make your life a living hell. Now it's not going to be safe for me to walk down the street because men is going to hate me even more because now they know, oh, this girl is probably anti-women. We should hate her, we should throw things at her, we should probably, I don't know, go as far as rape her. So you know what? Now we're going to live in a world where it's not safe for us to walk down the street. It's not safe for us to go to work because probably like if these places do have these anti-raging, angry men, they're going to hate us even more and they're going to make our life a living hell. So if you and not only that, you're also going against the feminist movement because feminist movement is only like trying to push forward for equality. Now in this world, you're going to make the world seem that men is above women. So you're completely against the feminist movement. So instead of, you know, empowering women or instead of making the world a better place, you're only going to make men hate us more. You're going to make women above men. So this is not promoting equality, ladies and gentlemen. You're only going to promote more hate. So we believe from side opposition that promoting hate is not the answer and you should stop doing that.
Thank you for the speech. I call upon every Prime Minister. Same here.
Ladies and gentlemen, I grew up a very sexist child. And here's the reasons as to why. It was what society taught me. But there was a day in which in a playground, a girl beat me up and called me a bitch. Today, I'm a proud feminist. You see, these are the kinds of things that we're trying to say. This isn't about absolute dominance of women. This is about society having no adequate alternative, and this being one of the most key factors in actually achieving empowerment in the end of the day, right? So a few things, right? Firstly, we brought about the principle of reparations and how like this works as an eye for an eye tool. We know that this is a way to compensate men and women for the kinds of harms that they suffered. Even in their best case scenario, assuming these like discourses are actually very effective in places like India, you're still not compensating a lot of the women who had injustices done to them, right? Whose moms and grandmoms were called the inferior sex, right? These are the things that we're uniquely bringing to these women, right? But a few things to say. I'm going to bring to you two questions, right? Firstly, I'm going to tell you exactly how misandry is, the practice of misandry is the strongest breaker of patriarchal structures. Secondly, I'll tell you exactly how this empowers women in the most vulnerable situations, right? I'm going to extend beyond what my partner said, and both of this was just not properly dealt with on their side, right? They told us that men will have a backlash, right? Okay, coming to my first issue. They said that men will have backlash, feminists will fight and things like that. Firstly, any effort taken to make sure that women get better things in society will have backlashes from men like these, right? There's absolutely no reason to give in to the oppressors because they're the loud voices in opposition, right? We know that opposition is not a significant reason to reduce a lot of like the movement in actually like fighting for change and things like that. But secondly, right, the reason a lot of these men will absolutely like be so defensive and shut down so many female voices is because they take comfort in the fact knowing that these women are the submissive sex and won't actually fight back, right? This is something we're taking away from them. Because the way patriarchal structures work is that men actually take comfort in the fact that they know they're always going to be the dominant one, right? Every effort women take to stand up for themselves, they can shut down. And at the point in which your side is coming here and actively saying that we need to defend these men, we need to make policies that are in favor of these individuals, and this is the point in which you don't actually help the women that are very like disenfranchised in society. But secondly, you're still empowering the people who are going to be privileged in society at the end of the day, right? I don't see any significant reason as to why we should like shut down their voices simply because misogynistic men will feel uncomfortable. Well, fuck them. Secondly, right, there's a few things you have to understand. Now, in our setup, we systematically explain to you, right, the step-by-step structure through which patriarchal structures are destroyed through the practice of misandry. I'll bring this back and extend. We told you exactly how this works, right? Firstly, we ensure that a lot of these women continue the same practices men have done to them in the past. Meaning to say, like women will go on public television and constantly criticize men in the same way that men have criticized them, right? We're gonna lobby for policies that oppress men in the same way women have been oppressed in workplaces before. Not to mention, in public areas, we're going to bring back bad stereotypes against men and publicly advertise them the same way they were advertised against women, right? Now, what does this necessarily do? One, we're targeting men in their vulnerable and insecure positions, the same way they've been doing to women, right? We no longer allow them the unique benefit of capitalizing on like insecurities and public narratives. We will also allow women to do that as well. But secondly, right, we know that this will definitely empower women in the sense that men will no longer look to them as the sex that will always be submissive, right? As the sex that we can always shut down. They know that this is a powerful voice that will stand up in opposition, no matter how many men you bring to your army to fight them, right? There's no effective way to actually shutting women down in our side of the world. In our world, we create an environment in which this eye for an eye principle stands, and women can always stand up at the point that any injustice is done to them. And this is the most effective way of doing so, because even if you want to bring like talks and affirmative action policies and things like that, how many women are going to be oppressed in patriarchal structures before you can actually enact some of those policies, right? We think that even if you want like this patriarchal state to allow some of these educations to happen, firstly, there's like layers and layers of filtering that would happen to ensure that they're still somewhat succumb to patriarchal structures. But secondly, right, by the time they happen, we just don't think it's an inefficient process to ensure that women are properly compensated too. This is a burden they're going to have to answer. But secondly, right, how this empowers women in the most vulnerable situations. They said that we need to teach equality and affirmative action policies, right? Okay, let me deal with them in the best case scenario, which is developing countries, right? Even in developed countries, right? We know that in developing nations, by the time you lobby for affirmative action policies and things like that, we know a lot of women will definitely have been oppressed by patriarchal structures, right? There's no way in hell they can adequately cater to the mess that has been happening to them. So in that best case scenario, which is developed countries and only in developed countries in which you can actually have education systems that will properly cater to this mess. One, we know that these education systems, given that there's already some structural reasons as to why, like for example, even education systems can be somewhat sexist, right? We know that this is never going to be educated, like these people are not going to be educated in the best manner possible. But secondly, right, we know that a lot of the opposition coming from, these things will not be in the best way possible, right? But secondly, right, even by the time you like lobby for affirmative action policies and things like that, they need to provide us structural reasons as to how it's how it's okay or justified to allow these women, some of these women, to face problems in this, like within this time. What did we tell you to cater to this? Firstly, we told you exactly how trickling down effect works, right? More often than not, the women that will opt for this first are the ones that are obviously the most influential ones in society, right? Women who have like significant platform. If it's a country like India, it's obviously going to be like what, Bollywood actresses is the first person to be on stage saying things like this, right? What does this necessarily entail? One, given that these people who are already influential in society are the ones going to be speaking out first, there's a lot of women that actually look up to them that can take this as a way of like, I want to now go out on television and say things about men in such a manner, right? Because secondly, given that a lot of these women actually don't know any alternative way to opt out, they've been oppressed to the point in which they're literally in that like little bubble that men have kept them, that they don't know any other way to fight out. You know that these women necessarily present an alternative metric for these women to do so. So even if you're going to lobby for things like affirmative action in school and things like that, we know that it's just not accessible for many women, right? But given that some of these women are so influential, they can reach larger parts of the country. And secondly, right, these things are going to be controversial, of course. So controversial things get talked about, get covered in ways in which it can actually reach more people in a country, not in a way in which they're trying to talk about, right? So if we need to give in all these benefits away just to cater to a few men, meninists in particular, we don't think that this is an effective thing to do so. We don't think it justifies any way of shutting down like of women voices at all, right? What is the best thing we got from their side? Their side has told us that in order to empower women, we need to make sure that we have much better means of doing so, much softer means of doing so, right? Firstly, we told you how in patriarchal structures that can't necessarily work, because in order for patriarchal structures to to succeed, they're always going to have to work in a way that oppresses women, take the most like culturally and religiously backward verses to make sure that women are always kept in the lower levels of patriarchy, right? So firstly, we told you that this is the only and one of the best effective ways for women to voice out against these patriarchal structures. Ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to be called a bitch by that girl. Thank you.
Over. All right. That is the Prime Minister for that one. And the Leader of Opposition. Here.
That was important. Thank you. I think it was pretty convenient for opening government to go back 40 years and place the debate then, and conveniently lock out and not engage with the world that we live in, and like give us a very biased characterization of what is actually happening in the world today. Also, never really engaging with the proper nuance of what OG has to talk about in this debate, which isn't about just championing women, but also of the internalization of the message of hate and contempt and prejudice, and how that particular nuance then justifies a better world for women, giving a sound analysis. That's where OG loses out in this debate. Let me talk to you a little bit about what is happening in the world today. Tira earlier talked to you about the alternatives that we are already willing to defend in the world today. We are okay with the feminist movement and the progress that's happening right now. We are far more okay with funding feminist movements and feminist activities. We are okay with penetrating more spaces and giving political movements far more traction, right? What are the kinds of organic change that we already see in the world today? We already see Hillary Clinton making it to the last stages of the presidency in America, which is an unprecedented event, right? We already see the fact that albeit the pay ratio is 70 cents to $1, a couple of years back, 10 years ago, it used to be 60 and 50 cents, right? Which gives us some idea of how there is some degree of progress here, right? And we'll also see an increase in terms of acceptance of affirmative action policies because of the non-confrontational nature of affirmative policies and not the confrontational nature of their side. And that's how we are different, because on their side, they never justified to us why all this organic change now has to be foregone for a far more confrontational nature on their side. Under our side, we see progress. We want to protect this progress, and we're okay with not regressing anything we've achieved. Recognize that on the their side, they had to prove to us why organic change is not enough, while the day-to-day basis life of a woman and the suffering has to be accelerated and made far worse in status quo at the expense of whatever it is they're fighting for. Right? That's where they fall short. Before I move on to the three argumentations I'll talk to you about today, one response, and then most of the other responses will be integrated in my speeches. No, thank you. On this idea of their policy and how they want to allow women to go on interviews and talk about how men are not giving them equal opportunities, right? Recognize that this is not mutually exclusive, and it's also not what they're supposed to defend in this debate. They're supposed to defend, I'll tell you what they're supposed to defend, right? They're supposed to defend things like anti-men protests. That means going out and saying, we hate men, fuck all men, we don't want any kind of compromise with men whatsoever. They have to defend worlds where there are lesser sentences by virtue of you being a woman, and also things like women-only corporations, I'll talk about later, and like how they're going to be locked out as well, right? That is the engagement that they have to have on their side. They never told
told us how they want that, all of the lesser non-confrontational methods of how women going, like feminist movements getting social traction is already things that we already achieved on our side. No, thank you. On the 3 things I'll talk to you about today, I'll explain to you what the patriarchy is and how doing that does not overthrow the patriarchy. I'll talk to you about the new barriers you erect and how these barriers are never going to be surmounted by women. And lastly, I'll talk to you a little bit more about the quality of life that I talked about earlier and how that went largely unengaged, right? Firstly, on the idea of what patriarchy is. Recognize that the patriarchy isn't just giving women more opportunities, it's a lot more than that. It's a long-term normalized phenomenon of the identity and the idea that men are far more superior. So things like giving the male voice far more credence and credibility over the women's voice. Things like believing the male identity is better. All of this have, like in status quo, we've already, as the feminist political movement, chosen to directly engage with this and ensure that this is engaged with, right? There has been progress in terms of giving women far more opportunities, in speaking opportunities, and etc. All of this is already happening in their world, but in their world, this is what's going to happen. The comparative is when you allow hate to be internalized and misandry to be internalized, the very opposite is going to be internalized as well, and that is misogyny. And recognize, we don't live in an equal world right now. The very characterization pointed out to you from OG is correct. Men have far more social capital, men have far more political capital, and men are far more favored in the world that we live in today versus women. What does this mean? It means that the misogyny that's going to be the response to misandry is going to get far more traction and far more buy-in than the misandry. That means women are continually going to be degraded by men. Every time a woman walks down the street, she's going to be spat on, she's going to be pushed down, and she's going to be horribly violated in ways that you don't even want to imagine, right? That is the world that's going to happen on their side. They have to be fed by the short-term suffering of these women is the price we have to pay for some supposed benefit at the end of the day. Before I move on, closing.
When you continue to pander to the misogyny, when you continue to pander to the patriarchy and compromise on your values, you will end up not being able to overthrow the patriarchy at the end of the day.
Cool. So like I said earlier, there's already been organic change. Like if you want to talk about developing countries and patriarchal structures, right? We have MNCs like Apple penetrating these countries and giving like progressive messages, like affirmative action policies for women, normalizing these ideas in like conservative nations as well. So there is still some degree of organic change, right? That's organic change exists on the our side. They need to defend why the price we have to pay is that, right? Next, the barriers you erect, right? This is the job market analysis. I'm going to give you a very clear analysis because if you have things like anti-men work policy, this is what the world is going to look like. Like I said earlier, no, thank you. In the world that we live in, men have far more opportunities, men are far better, which means there are far more men CEOs, which means there are far more men majority boards in like large CEOs, right? What does it mean now when you enact like anti-men policies for like all women-only corporations? All of these mean that these men are going to become far more defensive and lock up women from opportunities, right? And recognize that these are the organizations or MNCs that have the opportunity and the unique ability to take women out of the oppression and the economic like starvation that they have right now, right? So in their world, what you have is men continually becoming far more like dominant, but now also have a rhetoric to use against the feminist movement, a rhetoric to use against every woman that they encounter, right? And that's horrible, and we're not willing to defend that. We're not willing to entrench misogyny just because the world we live in is not a world that is equitable already. Lastly, on this idea of quality of life, and this is what Kira talked about earlier, right? I'm going to nuance this to the workplace environment. In status quo, you need male allies. You don't win male allies on the government side because male allies are male and you're supposed to hate these males, which means every male ally that wants to help you in our side is now the very same ally that you hate and you're not okay with. You want them to give up their jobs in order to give you to give them your jobs, right? Which means you don't like them by virtue of the fact that they are men. The contempt and prejudice, it still applies to them, right? When you don't have male allies, you don't have the ability for you to report things like sexual harassment at workplace. When you don't have the ability to report things like maltreatment of you, like things like what they talked about earlier about mansplaining, etc. All of these nuanced matters receive no exposure to their side. We revert and regress back to the very fundamental fight, and that fundamental fight is no longer a fight we need to fight. We need to think about what we've already done thus far. Sometimes being called a bitch or calling people bitches are not a good thing to do.
Right. thank the leader of the opposition. Begin with closing out the debate.
It's a shame. It's still in developing countries where is the fall of women. This is the thing we our government actually want to take two questions in my speech. Firstly, why extend the principle of human rights by opening government and then how we actually focus on effective empowerment at the end of the day. Now, why opening the look here? Why is it that needs fear inside women? Understand that when that is a problem, there's always one issue of being companies is that these women are these misogynists don't see that the problem exists in the first place. That's why you don't see feminist movements or empowerment opportunities actually happening in developing countries, because the majority of the misogynistic women think like, okay, oh well, that's not my problem, why should I care about it in the first place? But the moment you actually enact these policies, it affects men in a personal level. That's when these people really feel that, okay, there is a problem, that's what I should do something. Look, you understand, the first intuition that comes to someone's mind when there's a problem is, look here, I need to find a solution for it. That's what we are trying to push from side closing government. Men will now try to find, okay, they will understand, internalize, there is a problem going on, there's something I should do about it. When you make men feel cornered, when you make them feel that they're pushed into a corner and they're being antagonized, that's when they see a need to at least address the issues. Because vast majority of these bigoted men in developing countries, whenever you actually try to approach them with social changes, they literally shun you down. There's no kind of political lobbying in developing countries, but their best case scenario coming from side opening opposition was, look here, developed countries, we have 70 to $1 ratio. Okay, we agree that, but when are you going to reach the 1-to-1 ratio? At the end of the day, we see that they were talking about organic change, but they never told us what this organic change look like. We say that there is an urgent need for change to happen quick. That's when you can really solve the problem. Firstly, how is it that you can do it? I'll extend on the principle they brought about affirmative action. At the end of the day, look here, the reason we came out for affirmative action is, yes, it discriminates white people inherently, that's okay, but understand that these women have been going through silent slavery, silent oppression. Not many people actually know what's going inside. The vast majority of people don't see what actually is going on to these people and these women in countries like India or Sri Lanka. That's when we say you take an affirmative action to a next level. You go on, hate the men, screw them for whatever they do. For example, when you walk on the street, if someone catcalls you, you have the opportunity of shutting them down by calling them names, because now we see more women will actually join your cause. Now because the reason is, when you actually have these policies where you can literally hate men for what they do, the ability for women to join these causes is much more. First reason, how will that happen? When we see that there is backlash, it's actually a good thing. We see the short-term backlash is something good. It means that men are realizing that there is a problem existing in the first place. How is it good? Because now when you see men try to come out and shut these women down more, we see more women joining this cause in the first place. Because notice in developing countries, women always take a back seat when it comes to joining social movements, social causes. For example, if you take feminism in India, it's only a few figures and a few roles who are actually trying to join this cause. But the moment you enact a policy where you're saying that you can go all out and hate these men, that's when the women are more likely to join, because the amount of support you can get to actually call down these men is much more in our world. Moving on to my second thing, at the end of the day, how will discussion happen? For example, when affirmative action policies were first enacted in these countries, the white people brought this out to the courts. Look here, why am I being the one discriminated in this case? That's when the discussion became public. People understood the realization that this is what has been happening to the African American people. This is what's been going on at the end of the day. This is why when you enact the policy of hatred and
where women can actually call out men for who they really are, that's when the discussion becomes public. That's when in these developing countries like India, Sri Lanka or Bangladesh, people will realize that this is the problem going on. Even though I come out to court and say that I don't have a job as a man in a company, that's when we will understand that, look here, the reason you don't have the job is because you have never been giving the jobs out to the women in the first place. That's how you're actually going to solve misogyny in the first place and overthrow patriarchy at the end of the day. Second reason is, at the end of the day, how you're actually going to overthrow patriarchy. The moment you create more opportunities for women, the moment you actually reduce the, for example, prison sentences and so on and so forth, you see that men will start understanding, okay, the reason they get lower sentences or the reason there's only women-only companies is because we are doing something wrong. The level of self-actualization that we can create within men is much more. That's when you're actually going to create more organic change, opposed to side how opposition talked about. The level of change is quite fast in terms of side opening inside government, because at the end of the day, you're addressing the issue in a very urgent manner. But then side opening opposition said that, okay, look here, the reason women won't actually get what they want is because men have political capital, they have more influence. At the end of the day, look here, what we want to do is change the narrative. At the end of the day, when you actually force men to rethink what they're doing, you're going to change the narrative. You're going to turn all the political capital towards the side of the women. Why is this the case? Because men want to solve the problem. If the policy has been enacted that women can actually hate men, men want to take it back. So they'll do everything in their capacity to get the policy out of the country. That means they want to get their equal standards back again. That's when men will actually do things to actually help these women, because they want they want equal platform in the way. This is how you approach equality in a brutal manner. If you really want to approach equality at the end of the day, you might as well approach it with a different form, because for all these years you tried, feminist movements have been trying to approach equality for men and women in a very in a stance that men didn't actually realize that there was a problem of equality in the first place. And it has always been women who have been submissive to men throughout history. This is why we believe at the end of the day, we need to make sure that these women have whatever it takes to shut down men. For all these reasons, go with side closing government.
That's the member of opposition.
I am appalled that the only progress and description of the feminism progress that side government has given is that it was slow. They don't realize for 100 fucking years, women have been fighting diplomatically, getting shunned out of their houses to ensure women's rights are being upheld in the best form so that feminism has a good reputation so they can integrate into society. They disregard that. Remember that for so long, and recognize feminism is working, whether it's slow or not. For so long, they've been fighting the fight, and they've been consistent in ensuring a diplomatic sort of approach to it, and to ensure that they are not seen as femi-Nazis and extreme feminism. We want feminism to be accepted, and we'll tell you how, and their side is like, no, right? Okay, so basically, what is it going to look like when women exert power? Recognize that when women exert power, this is what is going to happen. Not only are they going to screw over the CEOs, they are going to take advantage of all the men because they are only seen as men. So what's going to happen? No, is that men as a whole, they will be excluded from this narrative. Men that are fighting for feminism will be excluded from this narrative. Men that are on the fence, for example, trans men who are willing to help the feminist movement are going to be excluded from this narrative. So many fence sitters will not be on the feminism side. Now, tell you why we need these people to ensure this movement progresses. No, right. So I'll tell you, and also directly engaging to them, why is it principally unjust? We think that, of course, you are hurt, but recognize for the past, a lot of feminism has always held the moderate stance and has always tried to fight the fight diplomatically. Recognize that exerting your strength in a sort of aggressive way and shunning down men is principally unjust as a feminist. We think that you like getting an eye for an eye is not like in line with the feminist narrative. So what exactly is the feminist narrative? We think this: a feminist believes that we have to get equality, one, and secondly, we want to allow choices and we want to allow no, and we think that the best way to do it is diplomatically. Why do I say it's important to recognize that feminists celebrate choices is this? Recognize the point at which you sort of imply these misandristic policies is the point at which you start to, like Khaled said, you start to put a pedestal on these people, saying you have to be aggressive. In this case, a lot of the times, the feminists who already decided what their beliefs was and how they were going to reach this point are going to feel conflicted. Because I don't want to shun men, I just want to ensure equality. At this point is when we don't have the support of these people, because these people believe that, oh, my movement as feminism is going to think that the only way I can fight for it is through aggression and through man-hating, which is not necessarily the case. So it's principally unjust for you to conflict with feminism. Why? Why is it bad for you to exclude yourself from the already existing feminist narrative? We think that's extremely bad because, number one, the audience it already has, right? We think that's extremely important to garner this support because these people are not just like normal people. Oftentimes, these people can act as lobbyists. Oftentimes, these people can act as activists. And we think that these people are the people that can garner support and educate these ignorant, bigoted men instead of like just fighting them and shunning them. Men don't need for us to say they're a bitch. What men need is for us to tell them what the problem is. They're not dumb, they're just ignorant. When we tell them and we expose and we make feminism a big deal through these masses that we can get from being a moderate and not an extremist group, it's the kind of like world we think that feminism can ensure the support, etc. Right? Sure.
Your opponents say they want organic change and they can get that because society is progressive. In the same breath, they say that men still control instruments of power. How are you going to get organic change?
Like I said just now,
I'll
tell you why your side will get it and then there's backlash. But I also told you just now is that men are not dumb, they're just ignorant. We think the bigger the feminist movement grows, more men will be like informed about it and more men will understand, right? So moving on to my second argument regarding why the patriarchal, what will be the patriarchy's response, and why do we need, why we can't shun them, right? So recognize this. The nature of the patriarchy is this: men think that they control everything, aggressive towards women, etc. But the point in which you tell them, the point at which women act aggressively back, recognize the mentality that men are still aggressive exists. So what they're going to do is think that this person, this so-called weak person, thinks they're better than me. This creates room for them to retaliate, and this gives them sort of incentive to say, well, these women are just pretending to be strong because in their heads they are still the strong ones, because there's no informative way of telling these men exactly why they're not necessarily biologically stronger, etc. The point at which men necessarily think that women are going against them, we think that men can retaliate, and they won't. In their heads, they won't go, oh shit, women's rising, like, oh hell, women. No. They'll think, oh shit, women are rising. It's time to show them that we're the stronger ones, right? Because in their head, they still think that. So this is the point in which retaliation happens, and then this is the world that it's going to look like, right? We think the world that's going to happen is this. Not coexist, basically, right? So why is it necessarily important for the coexistence of men and women? We think that's important because with this, we can cater to all like spectrums of gender, and we think there's more likelihood of like people, like middle people and fensities to be what's that thing called, catered to, right? For example, issues such as like poverty, which both genders go through, we think it's oftentimes hard for like men and women to look past their differences to like cater to those issues. We think that's extremely harmful. We think we need the existence of men and women together. Why? Because we think at the end of the day, we can coexist, and at the end of the day, that is what equality stands for. Also, we can't live in a world where literally you just go head to head, because oftentimes this is going to be the main like cause and the main like fight you're fighting for, and oftentimes issues are being put aside, right? Also, in response to them saying that why we need it to be quick, no, we don't need it to be quick, because it's been happening and going on for ages, and we think that feminism is only getting stronger. We don't deny that there is still an existence of bigots and idiots like that, but we think that it's no lie when I say that feminism is getting somewhere, and if we just stay moderate and we stay true to our principles as feminists, we think we can get to a point where equality happens and coexistence happens. With that, women need equality, and it's not going to happen if we keep screwing over men.
Panel, when in your fight to go against your oppressors, you continue to pander to your oppressors. You continue to say, oh, but the things you say are somewhat right. I'll compromise on my values, therefore I'll pander to you. You implicitly agree that your oppressors are still strong. You implicitly agree that your oppressors are still true. Do we think that that's the world in which opposition is living in? When you continue to work within the patriarchal system and pandering to the patriarchal system, you don't get to overthrow the patriarchal system. We told you, Mr. Speaker, before I move into the whipping of the opposition, right? We told you, Mr. Speaker, how necessarily closing government is unique from from opening government. We told you, number one, how men feel like it is a problem, how men feel like it is an attack, a personal attack, and they feel that there is a need for them to create change because they are personally affected by it. Secondly, we told you that if men see that problem, then they want to solve it. But if men don't see that problem, then they don't want to solve it. And we also told you why compensations must be made. Let's talk about the things that we want to talk about. Let's talk about the debate, right? So two things I'm going to talk about. I'm firstly going to talk about the movement necessarily and how the feminist movement and how change necessarily happens under both sides. And then secondly, I'm going to talk about overthrowing the patriarchy and who at the end of the day overthrows the patriarchy. Let's first talk about the movement and necessarily who helps the movement at the end of the day. And this is something that came from closing opposition. Closing opposition says that principally we shouldn't do this because this is against the principles of feminism and against the principles of how feminism works. We don't think that feminism is a homogeneous thing, that is only one thing. We think that at the end of the day, feminism is something that advocates for the equality of men and women, true, but they also advocates for the rights for this woman. And at the end of the day, we think that these feminist movements don't have that high of a responsibility to maintain that narrative. Rather, they have a higher responsibility to actually get change happening and to actually protect women on the ground. We think that in that comparison, we think we cater to that responsibility better. Secondly, they told us, oh, but we'll lose audience because people won't people only subscribe, people only support feminism because it's something that's necessarily moderate and so on and so forth. We don't think that that's true. We think the audience is there because it is because of the fight you're fighting for and necessarily because of the way you're fighting that fight. But even if that is true, right, we think that it's much more important that we have an audience that truly is there for the fight that we are fighting for, and it's not only there because of the way we fight that fight. We want true audience, we want true allies. So then that's the second thing, and the thing that came from opening opposition was this. Oh, but we lose allies and we lose the ability to have more allies and so on and so forth. We don't think that that's necessarily true. We don't think that men will immediately think, oh, you're attacking my people and therefore I will not be allies to you. The easy way to see this is that within social media there's this hashtag going around that men are trash. This does not mean that all men will suddenly stop supporting the feminist movement. We know that, and especially these allies necessarily know that you're not the people being talked about, that you're not the man that is being called trash. That even if this is true, and even if we lose these allies, we'd rather trade off the number of these allies on the comparative that these women really stand against the patriarchy, and these women are able to push against the patriarchy. The third thing that was talked about under this issue was this idea that, oh, but it will become a worse world for women, that feminist movements will not be able to become the support system that it should have been for women. We don't think that that's necessarily the truest thing that could happen. Because what happens when you have this narrative, when you have these policies at the end of the day, is that you create a narrative that no more are men stronger than you. no more are you weaker, are you the weaker sex. What this means is that you collectivize and you create this, you make women come together and band together to support each other. What this means is that in the long-term comparative, right, firstly, we don't think that that's necessarily true, that the safety of these women are necessarily taken away, because when you catcall a woman, another woman will step up and like call you out for it and smack you across the face for it, because she no longer feels like she is the weaker one within that interaction. But secondly, we think that there is no change under their side, because the real reason why men catcall women is because they believe within themselves that they are the superior sex, that they are stronger. So when you go on and change that narrative, when you go on and force these men to face that narrative and to say, wait, I am not the superior sex, you change that from happening. What we think then happens under their side is that these safe spaces don't exist anymore, and the education that they wanted is the idea, the education that they wanted still does not defeat the underlying narrative, because you still work within the patriarchal system, because the patriarchal system will still check you and tell you to not defeat them at the end of the day. Yeah, opening.
So the exclusive benefit coming up from closing government is that developing countries, conservative men are far more likely to buy into your radical form of feminism. Recognizing these individuals that are benefiting from patriarchy, why would they respond with more violence to your violence?
Oh, brings me nicely to the second part of my speech. So secondly, overthrowing the patriarchy and how we overthrow patriarchy under closing government. And this is something that was exclusive coming from Manasseh. Is the idea that when you antagonize men and when you make men feel attacked, when you make men feel like the fight is personal, you bring the fight forward and you push the fight into the public sphere. What this means is that men who now like chill and like look at, oh, feminist movements, yeah, these movements are for women, nothing will happen to me, I don't need to do anything, feel like now it is something that they have to care about because they are targeting you and they will target you. So what will happen in that sense? Two things will happen. One, yes, true, we concede that there will be people who will immediately backlash and who will like go mad and whatnot. We don't think that necessarily is a large amount of people. These people are meninists who will like still do that anyway. What we think is most probably will happen is that people will start thinking to themselves, why am I facing this? Why are people hating me now when these people have not hated me before? This is where the argumentation that came from Manasseh was important, because discourse then exists, because you force people to talk about it. Because when white people argued against affirmative action in colleges, everyone talked about whether affirmative action is good or bad. That does not happen under their side. They are too slow. We don't think that this is best for women. We think IIUM should go to
Order. Right, like in talking with. Now put the defenders of the opposition with. Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, that's the reason why the feminazis are not taken seriously. Because in the media, they are burning bras. In the media, they are spitting on people who was just walking around, like things like that. This is the reason why the movement, like that particular branch of the feminist movement, is not taken seriously. Understand that from their side, that's exactly what they're fighting for. They're fighting for aggressive means of showing power, aggressive means of showing that we can do much more than what you can do. The point in which that happens, we think that you dilute all of the values that the feminist movement have been fighting for 100 freaking years, and we don't think you help the feminist movement at the end of the day. Also understand that because of their policies, it only benefits certain groups of individuals, in which individuals who are courageous enough, individuals who are able to identify themselves with that. We think that at the end of the day, you lose out on a lot of people, like in developing countries, in which women are still scared to go out and to tell that they are facing oppression. We think under their side, they're just much more devil. They think that, I think that they can rot in hell, right? Like, moving on, right? There's two questions that we need to, like, before I move on to my issue, let's answer two questions, right? Like, how are the policies, through aggressive means, like how are like policies through aggressive means can be seen? Like, sure, even if you are able to like push policies through, we think that the backlash after getting like those policies being through is problematic. People will think that because these policies are gotten from like through like horrible means of that, people will always be at the point in which they criticize. We think particularly AA at the moment becomes horrible. People would just still criticize and say like, oh, it's AA through horrible mean, we don't think it's legitimate, we don't think it's valid. At that point of time, it's much more easy for political individual, like for politicians to not say to anything or not to help this movement to actually lobby for anything, because it's horrible, because it's really extreme, because it does not give any form of like recognition or like a proper way of doing so. Sit down. Like, second one, let's talk about the the attack on personal level. Like, sure, like at the point of time they will find themselves like bowing down and understand that there are like problems. We have to understand that those who will bow down are those who can actually see, like who are actually like not understanding enough of like what are the current point of time. But you have to understand the arrogant people, the ignorant one will never bow down, and at that point of time they will retaliate even more. We don't think at that point of time you include more people into the discussion, you include more people to understand what are the kind of problems that they are facing. So we think under their side, all the kind of things that they are trying to fight for is horrible and does not help the movement as a whole. Sit down. Let's move on to the first issue, right? How does misandristic policies and practices and policies look like? Like, is it like inside of how Khalis, explained to us? Like, sure, it can be that way, but you have to understand, because these people or this movement, they need to exert power. They need to show that we are capable of doing so much, right? We are the most powerful group out there. So in that particular time, in order to garner that like exclusive attention, what they do, they ridicule people. And who are the people they ridicule? They ridicule the people on the lowest common denominator, meaning to say they will ridicule men who literally don't do anything. They will ridicule men who are like soft, like trans, like gay men, for instance. These are the community, or these are the individuals that they will make fun of, like things like, oh, you're still a man at the end of the day, so it's justified for us to ridicule you. At that point of time, it's problematic. Why is it problematic? Because you see that at the end of the day, you harm the movement. You make the movement seen as a movement that attack people for no reason. Have a seat, everyone, right? Because you have to understand that even though it creates a form of empowerment, your empowerment is on a small scale, only in which certain individuals can agree to it, can like confirm to it. You have to understand that the movement itself has fight for a lot of things, right? At this point in time, this is where your fathers your fathers in a conservative environment will literally tell your wife, will literally tell your daughter, fuck off, don't go out, don't associate yourself with any form of woman, because I'm afraid that you will join them, you will be like them. What's the problem with this, right? Because we tell you that you close down to all excess of empowerment that is existing, like how like intersectional feminists there is, and you think that when you shut down all of those particular access, you shut down them from being able to go to their support structures, from being able to go to safe space to express themselves on how or what the kind of things that they do, to be able to know like what are the kind of things that they lose out, that they can fight for. We think at the end of the day, you don't help anything at all, right? So we think under our side, we acknowledge the fact that the feminist movement has been fighting for a lot, and we don't want to like devalue all of the things that they've been fighting for, and like for everything, right? We think under your side, you discredit everything, right? It makes me cry to know that you guys are really horrible, right? Sit down. Second thing, right? How you devalue the feminist movement as a whole. Acknowledge that the kind of fight that these women have gone through to get recognition, to have policies being pushed in parliament. The point in which you become aggressive to stay in power, your original value will be diluted down. Why? Because in the fight of being misandristic and like trying to empower these misandristic policies, you need to show that you're still in power. You need to be always confident that I can fuck you up, I can spit in your face and tell you that you're a bitch, right? Things like that you are going to glorify. The point in which that becomes the original point is the point in which that becomes the main narrative. You push down, you flush down all the kind of things like choices, things like how you empower equality. Those particular things don't exist under your side because the main narrative that you are fighting for is, spitting someone, slapping someone in the face, things like that. We think that's much more problematic because also at that point of time, you push people to be more aggressive. You push people to say, hey, if you want to be a part of the movement, you need to slap person. You need to be aggressive like us. We think at that point of time, people will be appalled with whatever you do, right? Because at the end of the time, you weaken the movement. It's hard for the people to change their mind to whether to join you or not to join you. We think that at that point of time it's just problematic, right? Because the second thing is that the harms that you discredit the movement, right? You discredit all of the kind of thing that they have been doing for years and years, right? And that we think that at that point of time it's just much harder for you to educate people on what are the kind of problems that is happening between genders. How would you expect to tell the children that we need to respect each gender if they go on TV, they look at women like, la, 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 I want to burn your bra. Things like that would necessarily happen. We don't think we want a world in which that happens. We think that the progression in the feminist movement or the progression that the feminist movement have that is a good form of progression, and we don't think we don't want to lose out on all the kind of benefits that I fight for, right? Because you have to protect that you would concede, under your side, you have to concede to the fact that these people would what are the kind of things that they will get at the end of the day, and how does those aggressive means would benefit them at the end of the day. I think I'm going to finals F off.